Hi, my name is Luna. And until last year, I thought I understood who I was, what I wanted, and who I could count on. I was wrong. At 31, I wasn't chasing Instagram likes or hosting wine nights like my younger sister Brooke. My world was smaller, quieter, and, in my opinion, more meaningful. I lived in a modest apartment near the University of Michigan, where I worked as a geneticist studying a rare neurological disorder called Halston-Lewis syndrome, a condition so obscure it barely gets a footnote in medical textbooks. But to the families affected by it, it's everything. While some kids grew up idolizing pop stars or superheroes, I worshipped double helices and petri dishes. Instead of bedtime stories, I got Mendel's laws of inheritance, delivered by the one man who truly saw me, my grandfather, Dr. Walter Halston. Grandpa Walter wasn't just a brilliant geneticist with a resume that included 3 honorary doctorates and a Nobel nomination. He was also the only person in my family who didn't treat my passion for science as something odd or inconvenient. When I was 7, he taught me how to use a microscope. At 10, he bought me my first lab kit, and by the time I got to grad school, he was funding my research when grants fell through. He used to say, "Luna, there's nothing more powerful than uncovering truth inside our DNA. Genes don't lie. People do." My parents, Mitchell and Grace Hartman, lived in Orlando, Florida. And while they were never cruel, they were distracted. Dad was an English professor who preferred his books to confrontation. Mom, a retired realtor, lived for country club luncheons, Pilates, and the curated image of a perfect family. They didn't exactly understand my world, and they didn't try to. Then there was Brooke, 3 years younger. Blonde, always camera ready. She had over 300K followers on TikTok and a string of sponsorships from skincare brands I'd never heard of. She lived in L.A., called me her science-y sister, and only texted when she needed to borrow money or complain about her algorithm tanking. It's not that we hated each other, we just didn't speak the same language. But Grandpa Walter was different. He saw the big picture. He believed in my research on Halston-Lewis syndrome even when no one else did. While the rest of the world was busy chasing trends, he reminded me that what I was doing mattered. When he passed away at 88, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The man who had taught me everything about science, about truth, about purpose was gone. I thought the heartbreak of losing him would be the hardest part, but grief has a strange way of peeling back layers. In the weeks that followed his funeral, I began to realize something I wasn't prepared for. My family didn't just misunderstand me. They resented me. And they were about to prove it in ways I never saw coming. I knew Grandpa Walter was meticulous, every file labeled, every research note dated, every family photograph in a frame, perfectly straight. So when he passed, I wasn't surprised that his will was just as deliberate. What I wasn't ready for was the bomb it dropped on my family. 3 weeks after his funeral, we sat in the office of Marion Ellis, his estate attorney in downtown Ann Arbor. The room smelled like cedar and leather, old money, old secrets. There were 4 of us, me, my parents, and Brooke, who'd flown in from L.A. time. Me in head-to-toe beige loungewear and looked like she'd just stepped off a private jet. She scrolled her phone until Marion cleared her throat and began. Dr. Walter Halston left a legally binding last will and testament, updated 6 months before his passing. Marion said calmly, unfolding a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper. My heart was already thudding. She continued, to his granddaughter, Luna Hartman. He leaves the entirety of his estate, his residence at 17 Willow Lane. Valued at $2.6 million. His investment accounts totaling $1.5 million. And all scientific materials, equipment, and unpublished works. She paused for breath. To Brooke Hartman. A single disbursement of $25. Ling. To Mitchell and Grace Hartman, no monetary inheritance. The room went silent. My mother blinked slowly. My father looked at the floor. Brooke's head shot up like someone had yanked her ponytail. What? She snapped. That can't be right. Marian kept her tone. Professional. Your grandfather's instructions were clear. He wished to preserve his scientific legacy through Luna's work. He made provisions for certain charities and for your college fund in earlier years. But this is his final directive. Are you saying, Brooke spat, standing up, that the nerd sister gets everything? And I get a couple of Target gift cards worth. I opened my mouth to speak. But Mom got there first. No. Absolutely not, she said sharply. Walter was confused at the end. This will must be contested. He would never cut out his family like this. He loved Brooke. I stared at her, stunned. He loved me too. She waved her hand dismissively. That's not what this is about. Brooke needs this. She's not in the best place right now. What does that mean? I asked. Even though I already had an idea. It means, Mom hissed, that your sister has real-life issues. Debts. People who've threatened her. If you had any decency, you'd split the inheritance right now. Dad still said nothing. Typical. Brooke looked at me with something I'd never seen in her face before. Not frustration. Not jealousy. Desperation. Luna, she said softly. I'm really in trouble. I'll help. I said. Of course I will. But Grandpa trusted me with this for a reason. The house, the lab, it's his life's work. It's not just property to sell. That's not your decision to make. Mom snapped. Family comes before science. Always. But I knew better. Because Grandpa once told me, family can be your biggest ally or your greatest weakness. What matters is who chooses to protect you when it costs them something. And in that moment, I realized I was about to find out exactly where my family stood. After that day at the attorney's office, the air between me and my family changed, like someone had cracked a window during a blizzard and never shut it again. At first, it was subtle. A few cold texts from Mom, a voicemail from Brooke that sounded suspiciously like it was read from a script. But then the calls started coming. Every day. Sometimes 2, 3, even 5 times. Mostly from Mom. And every time, her tone changed. One call. She'd be in tears, telling me how hard Brooke's life had been lately. The next, she'd be furious, accusing me of destroying our family over a bunch of beakers and old books. You wouldn't even have your fancy job if it weren't for us. She said during one particularly late-night call, we drove you to every science fair at every camp. We sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay us. I started silencing my phone after 9 p.m., but the texts kept coming. You don't abandon your family for a dead man's house. Brooke is your blood. That should mean something. You're throwing away your sister for furniture and fossils. That one almost made me laugh. Almost. Then came the dinner. I should have known something was off when I pulled up to the steakhouse and saw not just Mom, Dad, and Brooke, but also 2 of my aunts, 1 uncle, and a cousin I hadn't seen since Grandpa's 80th birthday. Family dinner. Mom had texted, "Let's talk calmly." Yeah. Right. From the moment I sat down. It felt like an intervention staged by a theater troupe that had only rehearsed for 5 minutes. My Aunt Denise leaned in first. "Sweetheart, I know how much you loved Walter. We all did. But he wouldn't want this tearing us apart." Then Uncle Ray chimed in. "Your research is admirable. Luna. Really. But Brooke's in a tough spot. This inheritance could mean the difference between her surviving and... Well, you know, I offered to help." I said evenly. "I'm not hoarding anything. I just want to respect Grandpa's wishes." "Respect," Mom said, her voice low and dangerous. "Is that what you call this?" The rest of dinner blurred together in a whirl of passive-aggressive guilt trips. Awkward silences. And side eyes. No one asked me how I was doing. No one asked about the work I'd dedicated a decade to. No one brought up Grandpa's legacy. Except to imply I was hoarding it. Only Dad stayed quiet. He buttered his roll, chewed slowly, and stared at the table like it held the secrets of the universe. Every time I looked to him, hoping he might speak up, his eyes just darted away. When the check came, Mom grabbed it with dramatic flair. "We'll cover this," she said. "After all, you have your millions now." I walked out feeling like I'd just been through a car wash made entirely of ice water and broken glass. Over the next few weeks, the pressure only intensified. Brooke started showing up at my apartment unannounced. She never stayed long, just enough to drop new information that twisted the knife a little deeper. They said they'd break my fingers. Luna. My fingers. I can't even sleep anymore. Once, she showed me a text thread. Threats. Demands. Names I didn't recognize. It was terrifying and real. And I couldn't pretend it didn't affect me. I called Marion, the estate attorney. In a panic, "Can we release any funds to help her without violating the will?" She paused. Then said gently, "You could establish a trust. One that offers structured support on the condition that Brooke enters therapy. Gets counseling. Maybe financial oversight." It was a reasonable compromise. I thought maybe, just maybe, it could end the madness. But when I presented the idea to Mom, she exploded. "Structure oversight. Are you calling your sister a child?" she shrieked. "She doesn't need your charity. She needs what's rightfully hers. What she needs," I said, trying to stay calm, "is help. Not a blank check to make things worse." Mom hung up. The next day, someone slipped an envelope under my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a photo of my car, parked outside my building. A sticky note attached. "You're not safe in that lab forever." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just family tension anymore. This was war. It was a Thursday night in late October. The kind of cold that bites through your coat and settles in your bones. I was at the lab. As usual, my sanctuary. Mi warzone. My everything. The place smelled faintly of ethanol and printer paper. Just the way I liked it. For a few hours, I could forget the texts, the threats, the weight of a family unraveling. Angela, my research assistant, had left early to study for her pathology midterm. I stayed behind, lost in a promising data run. We were on the brink of something that could change how Halston-Lewis syndrome was diagnosed. My pulse raced with the possibilities. Around 9:45 p.m. My stomach growled. I sealed the freezer, locked the workstation, and stepped out to grab a sandwich from the 24-hour cafe across the street. I wasn't gone more than 20 minutes. But that was enough. As I walked back across the lot, my phone buzzed. Security alert, unauthorized access detected. My breath caught. I opened the attached image and felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. It was my mother, captured on the lab's internal camera system, walking down the hallway in a long beige trench coat. Her face cold and determined. She was holding something Dad. A bag. A folder. Her purse. I sprinted. When I got to the genetics building, the door was ajar. Panic surged through me as I ran through the halls, my boots echoing like gunshots. I pushed open the lab door. The sight hit me like a slap. My mother stood in the center of the room, surrounded by chaos. One of the microscopes had been knocked off the counter. A centrifuge lay on its side. She had my research journals, years of field notes in her hands. And she was feeding pages into a portable shredder, with eerie precision axed. "Mom," I screamed, my voice cracking. "What the hell are you doing?" She looked up, completely unfazed. "You made your choice," she said, cool and sharp. "You chose this over us. Over your sister? Over your family." I stepped toward her, heart racing. "Those journals are irreplaceable. That's 10 years of data. You don't get to do this." She threw a handful of shredded pages at the floor like confetti. "You don't get to ignore your sister's pain. You don't get to act like you're better than everyone because you wear a lab coat." "This isn't about a lab coat," I shouted. "This is about destroying something I've built my whole life around." She moved to the fridge next, opened the door, yanked out trays of labeled vials, tossed them one by one into the sink, turning on the hot water. "Mom." "Stop." I lunged forward. "Those are genetic samples from real patients. Families entrusted us with them. They entrusted you." She snapped. "Just like your grandfather did. Just like he ignored the rest of us." Tears welled in my eyes as I saw liquid from the vials swirling down the drain. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. "Because if you won't give up the estate willingly," she said coldly, "then I'll destroy the one thing you love more than any of us. Maybe then you'll understand what it feels like to lose everything." I backed away slowly. My hands were trembling. Not with fear, but with something darker. Grief. Grief for a woman who had crossed a line I never thought she'd even approach. "You're not my daughter anymore," she said as she grabbed another notebook. "No," I replied quietly. "You just made sure of that." I reached for my phone. I already called campus security. I told her. "They're on their way. And so is the police." For the first time, her face faltered. "You wouldn't do that." "I would," I said. And I did. Minutes later, 2 security officers entered the room. One gasped audibly at the destruction. Broken glass, soaked pages, burned out equipment. "Dr. Hartman." One said. "Are you all right?" I nodded. "Barely. Please escort my mother out. And tell the police I'll be pressing charges for destruction of property and breach of a federal research contract." My mom turned to me, stunned. "You'd really arrest your own mother." I didn't. I said. "You did." As they led her away, I stood in the middle of my ruined lab. Samples destroyed. Equipment trashed. 10 years gone. I didn't cry. Not yet. But something inside me broke quietly. Permanently. That night, I sat alone under the harsh fluorescence, my hands resting on the edge of a shattered centrifuge, and whispered to no one, this was never just about money. The next morning, I sat in Marian Ellis's law office, staring at a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. My hands still smelled like ethanol and melted plastic. I hadn't slept. My lab was a war zone. And my mother had been arrested for felony property destruction. But what chilled me more than any of that was what Marion told me next. "Luna," she said, placing a sealed envelope on the polished oak table between us. "Your grandfather added something unusual to his will about 8 months before he passed." I blinked. More unusual than disinheriting most of his family, she didn't laugh. He added a clause. A DNA clause. I leaned back slowly. What kind of DNA clause? Marion folded her hands. He stipulated that if the will was contested, which it now has been by your mother, then all primary family members must submit DNA samples to verify biological relationships before any estate funds are released. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. You're telling me Grandpa wanted us to take paternity tests, essentially? Yes, she said. Not for you. He named you clearly and unequivocally. But anyone else involved in a dispute would need to prove their blood relation to him. I stared at her, stunned. Why would he do that? I asked him the same thing. She said. He just looked at me and said, "Science tells the truth when people won't." It had suspicions. Luna. But he never elaborated. Just insisted I draft the clause. My pulse quickened. You think he knew something? About my mom. About Brooke. I don't know. Marion admitted. But I do know this. The clause is enforceable. And now that your mother has formally contested the will, it's activated. I sat there in silence, processing what this meant. Brooke. Mom. Dad. Me. This wasn't just a legal maneuver anymore. It was about the truth. Whatever that meant now. Later that afternoon, I called my mother. She picked up on the third ring. If this is about the charges, it's not. I interrupted. It's about Grandpa's will. Her silence was instant and sharp. He included a clause. I said. Requiring DNA tests from all contesting parties. You. Brooke. Dad, samples have to be submitted if you want to continue challenging the inheritance. Still no response. It's a simple cheek swab. I continued. Non-invasive. Takes 5 minutes. Her voice, when it finally came, was strained and sharp. Absolutely not. He blinked. What? That man was losing his mind at the end. She hissed. This is absurd. It's legally required. Mom, I said, if you want to proceed, you have to comply. Then she said something that chilled me deeper than the destruction in my lab. I don't care what that old man wanted. She snapped. This isn't about science. This is about survival. Click. She hung up. 2 hours later, Brooke called. Her voice was quiet, almost childlike. Do I have to do it too? Yes. I said. You do. A pause. Okay. She whispered. I'll do it. Dad agreed without hesitation. For the sake of clarity. He said. Voice heavy. Whatever happens, we'll face it. But I wasn't sure anyone really knew what we were walking into. The samples were collected the following week. Sealed. Labeled. Shipped to LifeGene, one of the most respected independent labs in the country. And as I watched the courier drive off with that little box, I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly did Grandpa know, and why did he wait until the very end to force us to face it? The DNA results arrived 2 weeks later in a cream-colored envelope, sealed with a gold sticker that somehow made it feel more sacred than legal. Marion didn't open it right away. She waited until everyone had gathered. We met in a conference room downtown sterile SCE WWW2S. Quiet, Painfully neutral. The kind of room where divorces get finalized and trust funds get argued over. Dad sat on one side of the table. Hands folded. Face pale but calm. Brooke sat next to him, tapping her phone screen with trembling fingers. Mom arrived last, flanked by her attorney, dressed like she hadn't lost a single hour of sleep. I took a seat across from her. Not a word passed between us. Marian entered the room, nodded solemnly, and placed the envelope in the center of the table. These results come directly from Life Gene Labs, she said. They contain genetic relationship confirmations between all tested parties and the late Dr. Walter Halston. She opened it slowly, like peeling back a wound. Her eyes scanned the page, and for a long moment, she said nothing. Then she looked up. The results confirm that Luna Hartman is the biological granddaughter of Dr. Halston. As expected. My stomach twisted because I already knew what came next. Brooke Hartman, Marian continued, is not genetically related to Dr. Halston. Additionally, she is not the biological child of Mitchell Hartman. The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. Brooke's phone slid from her fingers and clattered to the floor. What she said hoarsely. Dad sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, eyes locked on Mom. Mom didn't blink. You knew I asked? My voice sharp. This is why you fought so hard. This is why you destroyed my lab. She finally spoke. You think you know everything, Luna, but you have no idea what sacrifices I've made. Sacrifices, Brooke whispered. You lied to me my entire life. Mom turned to her. I did it to protect you. To protect this family. It was one mistake. Brooke. One night, your father was away at a literature conference and I was lonely who Dad cut in. His voice was low and quiet, but it sliced through the room like a scalpel. Mom hesitated, then looked away. Danielle Lawson. Silence again. Danielle Lawson. Dad's former colleague. The man who used to come to our house for barbecues when I was in high school. He moved to Arizona 10 years ago. Now everything made a terrible kind of sense. Dad stood up slowly. 35 years. Grace. 35 years of lies. Mitchell. Please, he raised a hand. Don't test? He turned to Brooke. I don't care what the test says. I raised you. I loved you. That doesn't change. But Brooke wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the table. At nothing. At everything. Her identity, her foundation had just cracked into pieces. I'm not a Hartman, she whispered. I'm not a Halston. I'm nobody. No? I said softly. You're still my sister. That hasn't changed. She looked up at me, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Mom tried to speak again, but Marian cut her off. For legal purposes, Marian said, regaining her composure. Brooke is no longer a qualified beneficiary of Dr. Halston's estate. As such, the will remains intact. There will be no redistribution. My mother's expression broke. Just for a moment. Her armor cracked. She had lost. Not just the estate. Not just the courtroom battle. She had lost her family. For the first time in months. The phone stopped ringing. No more threatening messages. No more guilt-laced voicemails. Just silence. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I began to breathe again. The university had been surprisingly supportive after the lab incident. My department chair rallied colleagues to help salvage what they could. Insurance covered some of the damage. But the real losses, the patient samples, The original observation notes. The tiny margin of error data sets, those were irreplaceable. I grieved them quietly. Like fallen comrades. Still, I couldn't bring myself to step back into the same space. So, I moved everything what was left of my research. My laptop, passed my samples to my grandfather's house. The Victorian on Willow Lane. Now legally mine. His old study became my new lab. The oak shelves still held his journals. His microscope, ancient but pristine, stood by the window as if waiting for me. I sat there for hours that first night, running my fingers along the spines of his books, whispering, "Thanks. I'm still here. Grandpa, you didn't leave me alone." Meanwhile, Dad filed for divorce. Quietly. Respectfully. Just like the way he'd lived most of his life. He moved into a small lakeside cabin in Vermont. We spoke more now than we had in years. He confessed he'd known something, had been off for a long time but hadn't had the strength to confront it. "I failed you, Luna," he said once. "I should have stood up for you more. You're standing now." I told him. That's what matters. Brooke vanished from social media. Deleted her TikTok. Shut down the Instagram she'd once curated like an art gallery. I didn't hear from her for a few weeks. And then, late one Friday night, she showed up at my front door. No makeup. Hoodie pulled over her head. Tears already falling. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. I pulled her inside and made hot chocolate, like Grandpa used to do when I cried as a kid. We sat on the couch in silence. The kind that holds space instead of judgment. In the weeks that followed, she started therapy. She checked into a financial counseling program. She even started taking online classes in graphic design. "I'm not good at labs or numbers," she admitted once. "But I think I'm good at seeing patterns. In color. In chows." I believed her. As for me, the forced restart of my research brought something unexpected innovation. With limited resources and less pressure, I had to reapproach everything from data collection to modeling techniques, and somehow, it worked. We began seeing stronger, more consistent correlations in our Halston-Lewis studies. A breakthrough was no longer a far-off dream. It was on the horizon. To honor Grandpa's legacy, I established the Halston Foundation for Rare Genetic Research using a portion of the estate. The rest I poured into rebuilding my lab this time. On my terms. One morning, Marian visited to finalize some paperwork. As she signed the last page, she looked up at me and said, "You know, Walter believed deeply in truth, but he also believed in second chances. I think he'd be proud of what you're building, not just in the lab, but in your family." I smiled. Not because I felt triumphant, but because I finally felt whole. The house no longer felt like a memorial. It felt like a beginning. 1 year after the night my lab was destroyed, I stood in my grandfather's study, now my fully functional research space, watching Angela and our new team calibrate the final set of trial samples. The soft hum of equipment, the click of pipettes, the quiet rustle of lab coats moving through the room, it was music to me. We had done it. We had built something again. From scratch. From pain. From truth. The irony wasn't lost on me. A scientist who had spent her entire adult life studying DNA only to learn that what binds people together isn't always in the blood. Sometimes, it's in what we survive together. Our research into Halston-Lewis syndrome had taken an unexpected but promising turn. Without the burden of past routines and outdated assumptions, our leaner approach uncovered a previously overlooked genetic marker. Early trials showed it could help identify the syndrome in infants, Years before symptoms emerged, for families living under the weight of the unknown, that early knowledge could change everything. One afternoon, we received a video message from a mother whose child had participated in our pilot program. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she said, "Thank you for not giving up. You gave us a future we didn't know we could have." That's when I cried. Not because of grief this time, but because I knew we were finally living up to what Grandpa had always believed in. I still talk to him sometimes, usually late at night, after everyone's gone home, and the only sound is the gentle whir of machines. I sit in his old leather chair, fingers steepled under my chin like he used to do, and I imagine him sitting across from me. I get it now. I said aloud one night, "Why you added that clause? Why you made it messy? You didn't want to punish anyone, you just wanted the truth to have a place at the table." Truth had cost us, but it had also set us free. Brooke and I met for lunch every other Sunday now. She was living in Portland, working at a design firm, 6 months debt-free, and still showing up for therapy. Our conversations were slower, more honest. We didn't try to fix each other, we just listened. "I used to envy you," she said once. "I thought Grandpa loved you more. But I think maybe he just knew you needed it more." Dad was thriving too. He finished the novel he'd postponed for decades. It was a quiet bestseller, part memoir, part fiction, titled The House on Willow Lane. He sent me a signed copy with a handwritten note inside. "Some truths take a lifetime to speak. Thank you for making it possible." And Mom, she moved to Tucson. Started over. We weren't close, but we were civil. Occasionally, she'd send an email, a photo of a cactus, or an apology wrapped in an update. I didn't trust her. Not fully. But I didn't hate her either. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's letting go of the hope that the past could have been different. So, what did I learn through all of this? That family isn't defined by DNA, but by choice. That resilience isn't about never breaking, but about building again after everything falls apart. That truth, no matter how painful, can be the beginning of healing, not the end of love. And that legacies, the real ones, aren't found in wills or bank accounts. They're found in how we choose to carry on what we fight for, what we preserve, and who we become in the aftermath. So if you're listening to this story wondering what your own legacy will be, just know it's not about what you inherit. It's about what you build when no one else is watching. And if you're standing in the ashes of something you once loved, you're not alone. The rebuild is where the real story begins.